Hello friends, bonjour. This is Malik and welcome to the last part presentation about Terragrunt. In the last sections, we started from very basic and wrote a sample code in Terraform to deploy a network module including VPC, public and private subnet, internet gateway, and so on. In the other words, we prepare our network, deploy our application. If you look here, for example, for dev environment, in US East 1 region, we have created this VPC with this CIDR block. From this CIDR block, we have created one public and one private subnet in this availability zone. For example, you was asked to prepare a module to deploy an application like a web server or a module to deploy a server like Jenkins server or Ansible and so on. So what you have to do, this is our network in dev environment again, and you need to deploy an application here in the public or here in the private subnet. What you have to do, you want to deploy your application, for example, in the private one. For bring up this server, we need to use EC2 resources in AWS. So in continue, at first we want to create an EC2 by Terraform, change it to module, upload module to GitLab, prepare Terragrunt to use this module. Let's go into VS Code and take care of this step quickly. In the module folder, I have created a folder called app1. In this folder, I have created 4 Terraform files. main.tf that include the main code that will create an EC2 for us on AWS. Output, what we need to show us after EC2 created. For example, provide us what is the private IP of the EC2 that has been created. Provider file, in the provider file, we define AWS as a provider that Terraform then can download the plugin for AWS. And in variable, we define which variable we want to use. Let's go into Google. In Google, we search for Terraform AWS EC2, and from the result, click on the first one. And here you will see some example how to create an EC2. Normally, if we go down, you see here we have to use like this block resource, AWS instance, very important, and give it a name. Also, we have to define which AMI we have to use and which instance type and so on. Also, one thing is important. Let's back to diagram. How we can tell to AWS, please create this EC2 in this subnet. If we don't point the name of subnet, it will create in another location. We need to create this EC2, for example, in this specific private subnet. How we can do? Here we need an item, it's called subnet ID. Let's show you here. You see here, we have to define subnet ID in this block. When we define the subnet ID, AWS will understand where have to deploy this EC2. So let's back to VS Code. In the main one, as you see here, I will create an EC2 with this code. So here I use subnet ID, AMI, and instance type. AMI and instance type are very important. We define which type of Linux we have to use, how many CPU we need. So if we select the correct AMI, for example, we need one CPU and for example, 1 gig memory. So we have to use a specific AMI. If we need more CPU, we have to going and select another AMI. And also for the instance type, which instance we need to use. So if we go to AWS console, we can find all this information. You see here, I use variable. I describe how to use variable in the last sections. You can refer to the first and second one. I completely described about the variables. So in the variables you see here, I define some variables. One of the variables is region selection, in which region I want to deploy my EC2. Instance count, how many EC2 I want to run. For example, I want at the moment 1, maybe later ask bring up 10 EC2. So with instance count, I can bring up 10. Also another one, instance type, by default I selected T2 micro, and for the image type for the instance I use this one. Also I use another variable and I will describe about it later. Leave it as is. I will completely describe this one in some next minutes. And also I have a provider one. In the provider one I describe I want to use AWS, and when we run Terraform it will go and download AWS plugin for us. Also in the main one, if you see here, I use which provider I want to use. As you see here, I mentioned region, so I use a variable and you saw in the variable for that. So I put all of this file under the app1 folder, and I gonna upload this folder to GitLab. So when I want to use this module, I have to pass which region I want to use, how many instances I want to bring up, which instance type I need to use, and which image I like to use for this EC2. If you remember from before, we can define this variable in the tfvars file and pass them to the module and use in Terragrunt. So let's go into the configuration. In dev and in US-is1, I have created app1 folder. Here I created a tfvar files and transfer these 4 variables here. You see, I use US-is1, 1 instance, T2 micro, and this AMI for US-is1. But be careful, maybe this image only used in US-is1 and cannot be used in US West or another region. So every time you want to use in a specific region, you have to select the correct AMI code. So until here, I have created a module with these 4 files, and also I have created a tfvar files with this value. And finally, I will use this tfvar file in my Terragrunt to send this value to the module and create EC2 for us. Before going forward, let's do a little change here, and using this argument count and variable, also we define this var here, as you see, instance count. So what it can do for us? It does like a loop, and if we give a value to this, for example, if we give count equal 1, it runs only once. But if we give it, for example, 2, 3, it will run 2 or 3 times and will create 2 or 3 EC2 for us. And also let's add tag here. With these tags, we can give names to each EC2 that has been created. For example, EC2 01, 02, 03 based on the count we define in TF vars. Let's save it. Now it's a time to push this module to GitLab or GitHub or every repository that we are using. As I told you before, GitLab has this feature that works like Terraform module repository. I have recorded 2 videos about how to use GitLab or other repo providers as module registry. Today, briefly, I will try to use GitLab and GitHub to show you how to use them. Let's continue. Here is the repository that I have on GitLab. I clone it on my local computer. There is a folder called source here. Inside source folder, I have module folder. Let's switch inside module. As you see, only I have network. Let's copy app1 folder here and then push it to repository. Before that, let's create a branch. Git branch version 008. Check out to 008. Git branch. Let's copy app1 module transferred here. Let's back to terminal. Git status. Nice. So git add, git status again. Nice. And now git add. Git commit -iam version 008 updated with app1 module. Git push origin to 008. Before push, I forgot something. Let's back one step and another step, going to root. Here, if you see, I have a file called gitlab-ci. It's working for CI/CD, and when I push module to repository, it will take it and transfer to GitLab Terraform registry, Vim, and I have to change it to the latest version that I want to upload. Again, git add, git commit -am, and this one, git push origin to version 00. You see, new branch transferred to GitLab repository. Let's go into GitLab repository and see what happened there. You see here, you pushed this version 008 at this repository. So let's check in build section pipelines. As I told you, you see here, it upload the 008 version to GitLab Terraform registry. Terraform module registry. You see here, version 008 uploaded by Terraform here. So let's back to repository again, and I need to merge this branch to the main one. Now our repository is ready to use as a source in our Terragrunt configuration. Let's continue. Let's back to VS Code. So going to dev environment in US East 1. Here As you remember, before we have created network and use our terragrunt file here. So I close it also, and you see here I have created app1 folder. In this folder, I have created a file called terragrunt.hcl, like network. In this terragrunt.hcl, just I copy the content from network and transfer to this new terragrunt file. The same include root, and we'll go check up folders and find command.hcl, this one, and here in source, as you remember, after double slash, it means it's going to the module folder. Now, in a state of going to the network, here it goes to app1 folder. So again, we have two folders in module in the GitLab, and for access to app1 module, we switch to this folder. But which version we have uploaded? Version 8. Also, let's fix this one in network. The others is the same, just in the required file at the end, it's app in a state of network, we change it to app1 tf-var. Until here, everything is the same as network, just here we change the folder to app1 and select the latest version, and in a required var file, we gave this name app1 because in configuration we have this name. So far, so good. At the moment, if I run this code, it will go on AWS to create an EC2 for me, because in tf-var file, I ask to create one EC2. If I change it to number 2, it will go and create two EC2 for me. Let's leave it as 1 and back to terragrunt.hcl, where this EC2 will create. Where this EC2 will be created. In which subnet? In which VPC? Here, still this code don't know in which VPC, in which CIDR block, in which subnet has to create an EC2 for us. So from where can find subnet ID? So for answer these questions, at first let's create network component on AWS. From here, change to environment, to dev, to US East 1 network, terragrunt, plan. So on AWS, we'll create a VPC with this CIDR block and two subnets, one public in US is 1A with this CIDR block and one private, again the same region and with this CIDR block. Let's apply this one, yes, and it will create VPC, subnet, internet gateway, and so on. In a main wheel, let's connect to AWS console. So as you see here, it created a tutorial VPC with this CIDR block, these subnets, a private and public one. Let's see the CIDR block 10.16.30/24 for private and 1.0/24 for the public one, and so on. Let's back to VS Code. You see here the outputs, private subnet ID and public subnet ID. So for create EC2, we need this one, but we cannot use it manually and copy this one to other module to create EC2 for us. As you see here, it is in network output. Where they are recorded, where they are saved in S3 bucket. As you remember, all the state file recorded in S3 bucket. So we need in this file, in Terragrunt, find a way when it wants to run and go to the S3 bucket and retrieve the output information from the network module and use it here. There is a way for this one. There is a block in Terragrunt called dependency. If we go to Terragrunt official website, in configuration blocks and attribute, there is a block called dependency. Here, all the information you need, you can find here. The dependency block is used to configure module dependencies. Here, for create EC2, we need network. So the EC2 is dependent to network. Each dependency block exports the output of the target module as block attribute you can reference throughout the configuration. So it is completely clear. When we use dependency and give it a name, there is a config path. So just we need to tell dependency, I need network. So why I use ... for access. So for access to output, we need exit from app1 and going to network 1. And in network 1, automatically will export all the outputs in cache and use in the code we need. So in first step, we define dependency. You see here inputs. Here I use this name. If a little think about it, in app1 module, in variable, I define this variable here, app subnet ID. So you can use any name you want, but I use this name, app subnet ID. So I copy this one to Terragrunt file, and I need the value for this to assign here. So it comes from where? Dependency, network. As I told you, export all the outputs from the network. Just add outputs, keyword, and private subnet ID. You see it is here. If I want to use public one, just change it to public subnet ID, you see here. So it will read it as an input. So it has this one. When I run this Terragrunt code, it will pass this value plus another 4 value to the module and run the module and will create EC2. Let's run it. Just change it to app1 and Terragrunt plan. You see here, it will go and create an EC2 for us. You see subnet ID, this one. If we check it with this output, you see BBD at the end, BBD at the end. So take it. Just I need to apply this one and it will go and create an EC2 for us. Let's run it. Yes. In the app1 output, we ask to provide us the private IP of the instance that it will create. Let's see where it will be created. You see an instance created. This is the IP. It is located in 10.16.3. This is private one, 10.16.3. If I go to EC2, you see EC201 created here, and it is running. And if I click here, I see the IP. So let's destroy all of them. I destroy it. Before going forward, let's change the instance count to number 2 and run it again and see what will happen. You see here, 2 instances will be created. So let's apply it. You see here, 2 instances created. Let's refresh here. Instance 01, 02. The first one has this IP and the second one has this IP. Let's again destroy them. We don't need them anymore. Destroy completed. Let's switch to network and also destroy here. Yes, continue please. And yes, destroy completed. Let's clear the screen. In network 1, I want to change source to GitHub. I also push my modules to GitHub. Let's change the source. Here you see I change my source to GitHub. As I told you before, I pushed modules to GitHub, and you see here I'm using GitHub. This is the difference between the GitLab and GitHub. In GitLab, we can use GitLab Terraform module and using the TFR like Terraform module, and in GitHub only we can use as a normal repository and push module to GitHub and using the tag system. Again, if you want to learn about module repository on GitLab or GitHub, I recorded 2 videos about them, and I will pin their link about this video and you can refer them. Let's run Terragrunt plan, and you see it uses the same CIDR block as we defined it before, and it's run without any issue. If you need, also you can put some of your module to one repository in GitLab and also create another repository on the GitLab and push some of the module there. So no problem how many repository you have and how you want to use. We arrived to the end of Terragrunt series. I hope they are be useful for your information, and I will appreciate if you like and put your feedback in the comment section. Thank you so much. See you in another videos.